Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Oh, Tony, it's a Michigan Monday, and Michigan didn't play over the weekend. So you had a great idea, which is we didn't even ask people for Michigan questions. We just said, "What questions do you have?" And it turns out, Tony, they have some questions about Michigan, the Michigan football program, the status of the Michigan football program, the potential future of the Michigan football program. Great news, we get to talk about Michigan on Michigan Monday.
Well, there you go. And just because there's no game doesn't mean people still aren't interested in what is going on in the state up north. So, yeah, let's get it started. Let's go.
All right, from at @TKirkpatrick09. No need for any more Michigan Mondays. No need to enable what is being proven to be the biggest on-field cheating scandal in college football history. I think the verb tense there, is being proven, is probably an important one to emphasize, because I don't feel like this is certainly has not been proven. Could potentially be proven, could be on the way to be proven. I think I could get with all of those. Just want to make sure we're being real clear on our verb tenses here.
Yeah, if all of this comes true, I think maybe another question is, if all of this is real and is happening, is it the biggest on-field cheating scandal in college football history? And you probably have to make it modern history, because who knows there's all kinds of cheating going on in the days of, let's bring in the coal miners, let's bring in the factory workers, and you make the 32-year-old men beat up on 16-year-old children. Like, that was some on-field cheating back in the day as well. But this one would be, I mean, name something that even comes close. If everything that is being reported is true and is fact, what else is there?
Yeah, if everything that's being reported, and this is a
Yes.
very big if everything that's being reported or rumored is, then you might be at that level of, I have not done a great historical deep dive. This would be a great thing to talk to Matt Brown of the Extra Points newsletter about. He is a great college football historian. He might have a better sense of some of this stuff, but some of the stuff that has been rumored, and again, I will repeat, has been rumored, is, in addition to all the stuff that Ohio State fans are probably familiar with, was there some sort of sharing of illegally obtained information with the South Carolina football program? And then this spreads it to, now you're involving other conferences, you're involving other games, this is a, it's like WikiLeaks was kind of it was like a really stupid, it was a really stupid scandal that, turned into a relatively big thing, but it involved Wake Forest, so it was only kind of big. This is, if this is what caused Tennessee to lose that game against South Carolina last year, if that played some kind of role in that, then you're screwing with another school and another fan base, and I think there's a little bit of, where else is this going to go? How far does this reach? Because this, I know it feels like we've been talking about this forever, but it still feels like we're a little bit in the early days on all of this. And I was going to say none. Some of this has now been more or less admitted, so some of it's kind of proven to some degree, but a lot of the stuff, it feels like a lot of the more salacious stuff is not yet in the proven category or even the broadly proven category. So I'm gonna say, like, if this all this stuff is true, and I'm not expecting everything to be true, because that's just kind of how this works, but if a broad swath of what has been reported or rumored is true, then you might be in the biggest on-field cheating scandal in college football history.
Yeah, I'm looking back to see how long has this been going on in terms of being in the national news, and I don't even believe it's 2 weeks yet, because I
No.
just went back and looked at the podcast that we've done, and there was one on October 19th. That
Mhm.
was like the first time once this started breaking, is when Mark Givler and I did a show. So it hasn't been that long, and I know when the people have been, when you get news like 3 days in a row, and then you're like, oh man, this is crazy. And then you don't get any news for a while. You're like, oh, I guess maybe it's over. Oh, well. And then you kind of move on, or when something else comes out, you're like, oh, that's old news. And it's like, well, it's old news, but there's confirmation there, or there's clarification there. And I don't really think any of this is old because it is still happening. And it's still, like I said, it's not even 2 weeks old necessarily in terms of when we found out about this. So I think it's just the speed at which we get accustomed to news is faster than ever. And so it's like, well, I need more news. Where's the news? Where's the news? I'm looking for the news. And sometimes you just got to wait.
Yeah, and I mean, I've mentioned this before on this show and other shows, but you're getting into some of the stuff that is being rumored and being reported right now has potentially legal implications and beyond just like, hey, that's cheating in a football sense. So that's when you end up getting legal departments involved in a much more direct way in some of your reporting, and stuff has to get proven out, and you have to have, maybe a higher standard of proof before you can report something. So yeah, I think you need to recognize that you're not going to just get your little dopamine hit of new news. The meme, like, wake up honey, new Michigan news just dropped. Like, that's not just going to happen every 3 hours. This is, I mean, it was, I think, a Thursday night. So we're talking like, what, 10 days, 11 days, something like this. So this is still very early days in all of this stuff. And if you think this is slow, oh, friends, wait till the NCAA has to take control of things. You think this is slow, we'll see you in 2028. Next one from at @O_Pete 1926. And just based on this, I thought, based on the way this question is phrased, I thought I need to look up whether this person is an Ohio State fan or a Michigan fan. He is an Ohio State fan. His Twitter bio, a tremendous Twitter bio. Incredible name drop at the end here. Buckeye since the days of Archie. Cardinal since the days of Vinegar Ben Mizell. Former Mets pitcher, owner of one of the great names in baseball history, Vinegar Ben Mizell. He says, here is my legal defense. Sure, we were getting great intel from Stallions, but we had no idea he was using improper means to gather the information. Does not work if people start talking, coaches access the video files, a money trail goes back to Michigan.
Yeah, the attempt to, or perhaps the reality of keeping Jim Harbaugh out of the loop of this, or even keeping the coordinators out of the loop of this. Connor Stallions looks like he was trying, or like you're trying to keep the head coach from being aware of this, but when you are on the sideline talking to the coordinators, talking to the head coach, the lack of awareness meters have to be like, you got to goose them to believe them. I think it's not, I don't think it's believable that the coordinators were just accepting of the intel and not asking, where did it go? And if the answer is, I got it from TV and the All 22, every single coach watches All 22. They know what's available there, what isn't. And all of the coaches have seen television, so they know what's available there as well. Now, what it could mean, or what the reasoning could be, and is that, well, it's not 100% accurate, but it's still, I'm able to get 60% of the signals. Let's use that information, 60% of the signals from, without going to games, just from the All 22 and the TVs. If that's what he's telling the coaches, and it's still, hey, you know what? That's information. That's the term we're hearing lately that is being thrust upon us is code breaking rather than sign stealing. So, that's just breaking the code, getting stuff from the All 22 and a TV. And if the coaches are like, well, you know what? And he's, 60% of the time it works every time, that sort of thing. If Connor Stallions is actually, I won't go into the Cologne name, but if it's more like that where, yeah, we know it's not going to be 100% accurate, but hey, if you see something that you recognize, you tell us. And then I think there's some plausible deniability for the assistants in that regard, in terms of accepting the intel and asking where it comes from and being told TV and All 22. And then it gets into a little bit of the, well, the assistants are like, well, this is a military guy. So, I'm sure he's deciphered much more difficult codes than football sidelines.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I love the idea of code breakers instead of sign stealers. Like this is like the Navajo code talkers on the
Mhm.
sidelines for Michigan. That's tremendous. This does have a real, if you didn't, you didn't want to ask too many questions kind of vibe, because like you said, you know what's available on TV and you know what's available on the All 22 because you're watching the All 22. I mean, I've seen a lot of people online saying, "Hey, you get it all from the All 22." If you have watched All 22, you cannot get everything from the All 22. You can probably get something. And there was one of the reports that very obviously was sourced from the Michigan side of things, made it real clear. Oh boy, well, he was stealing stuff from TV copies in 2017. Okay. Has he gotten substantially better at it since 2017? It feels like the answer is probably yes, because now he's on the sideline and talking to the coordinators. So it feels like a relatively natural follow up question was like, hey, you seem like you're way better at this than you used to be. What are you doing differently? Because they're not showing any more signs on the All 22 than they did a few years ago, or on the TV copy than they did a few years ago. How did you get so much better? And if the answer is, oh, you don't want to know the answer, then that feels like that's kind of an answer. So, again, this is something where you got to sort of, we'll see. I think there's going to be a lot of, as they go through emails and stuff, and they go through texts, and they go through what computer access logs or whatever else, you may have more firm answers on, you know, this happened, this didn't happen. Got to remember, Jim Tressel, the whole case against Jim Tressel hinged on one email that he had just sort of acknowledged from someone. That was it. That was the entire thing. So it'll be interesting to see what information comes out. He mentioned the money trail at the end of this. That is the old journalism, follow the money. That's generally the old journalism rule of thumb. This time, according to some of the stuff that has come out, again, the sort of Michigan side reporting, I think it was the Dan Murphy ESPN report with the Division III coach that sure felt like it was coming from the Michigan side of things, made a point, hey, he paid me with his own Venmo. It was just him. And, how traceable is that money? Can that money be traced back to Michigan? I think that might not be as fruitful a path for people to pursue, but again, we'll see as this all plays out.
In terms of the coaches not wanting to know, I think what Counter Stallions could just start saying is, well, the algorithm, and as soon as you say algorithm, the coaches are the eyes glaze over and they're like, whatever, just continue to do your nerd stuff, that sort of thing.
That is always a possibility. Just say AI, and not only then will the coaches leave you alone. You'll have a bunch of like venture capital people like swinging through the windows like a SWAT team trying to give you money. So yeah, it could be win-win for Counter Science there. Next one at VW Chad W. The opposite of win-win. Do you guys see vacated wins in Michigan's future? And a related one from at Jerk Zeus. If they vacate Michigan wins, do the Ohio State players get the gold pants for the previous 2 years? So I think, if this sort of proceeds to the point where this is an NCAA case and the NCAA feels that they have, enough proof that, hey, this happened, at that point, and hey, this happened, this had a material impact, it was a clear violation of the rules. At that point, it becomes a real Jim Harbaugh problem because Jim Harbaugh is responsible for all the people below him. That's a relatively new NCAA rule that the head coach is responsible for, violations that happen for people below him. So at that point, that becomes his issue. I think, the vacating of wins seems like if this is all proven out, that does feel like a fairly likely, at least part of what could be the punishment. Again, if this all plays out. But if that all plays out, it doesn't mean Ohio State won. It just means Michigan didn't win according to the official rules. So I would assume there would be no gold pants given out to those teams. It would just be, like the 2010 Ohio State Michigan game. Officially, no one won that game.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking now as you're saying that, I'll just ask Jim Lachey when I see him on Saturday at the game because he's part of that gold pants leadership council, and I'll just be like, hey, is this, because the answer is going to be no, but I would just like to hear it from him because I think I asked him one other time, would Ohio State players get 2 pairs if they beat Michigan in the regular season than in the conference championship game? yeah, I think even when Legends and Leaders started, I probably sent him an email saying, "Hey, would you get 2 pairs of gold pants?" And I think the answer was at that time, like, "We need to talk about that." Like, this is not something, and maybe they talked about it and there was never any need. But, yeah, I wouldn't expect any gold pants. I do think wins will be vacated just based on, um honestly, I could see it happening just based on what has it's what we know, what has been reported, in terms of this sure seems like this was happening. And so I think I think we'll see more, but I think it's an easy enough punishment that sounds severe by the NCAA, but also everybody still got to play the games, and it's like, well, but you have to give the trophies back and things like that. So it carries pretend weight in the eyes of the NCAA, whereas and then the program just continues on. It's like it happened. We like the way we talk about the 2010 Ohio State season. Like we all saw it. So what exactly has been vacated? So I do expect vacated wins to happen, but I don't know that it's really going to materially destroy anybody.
Yeah, and I guess the interesting question is that the big chunk of this? Is this just
Mm.
Jim Harbaugh gets a show cause and they vacate some wins, or does the punishment go beyond that? And the tricky part of this, in addition to the fact that we don't know what's actually going to get proven out as the investigation moves on, is that there is no prescribed penalty in the rule book for this type of violation. It doesn't say, and if you do this, you get fill in the blank punishment. So the NCAA is going to be kind of making it up as they go. So that's one of the reasons that this is all kind of one big gray area in some ways. Next one from @Dan177111057. We all know Jimmy is a huge Mel Gibson guy. Was it a mistake to refer to the film where a rule breaker was caught and severely punished? Instead, he could have compared himself to a broken man who protected his family from outside threats by defeating them with a common beverage.
This is one of my favorite questions of all time. Now, I didn't hear the Braveheart reference. I just saw other people referencing it because I was gonna actually go back and check it out, but then I got distracted by the idea that Jim Harbaugh is Mel Gibson from Signs, which is one of the great scary jump movies of all time. And then it got me wondering, what other Mel Gibson movies could he be? I think there's a Conspiracy Theory was the movie that Mel Gibson was in that seems to be maybe the Michigan fan base is seeing some images, some mirroring there between the conspiracies being thrown around and that Mel Gibson movie. What if the Wins are kidnapped and Jim Harbaugh yells out, "Give me back my wins," something like that from Ransom. Um, what else, Tom? I don't want to get into the post-apocalyptic dystopian Mad Max realm of this, but I could see it.
Tony, I was just trying to go through the Mel Gibson IMDb list, and he's been in a whole bunch of stuff recently that I'm sure was great, and I'm deeply regretting that I'm missing it. I'm just going to read you two movies that came out in the year of our Lord 2022 featuring Mel Gibson. You ready?
Mhm.
Bandit seems potentially relevant, and one more, Tony. Hot Seat might maybe be somehow, I don't know, maybe. I haven't seen either of those, so I can't really provide any specifics on how the plots might be related. At least the movie posters look good.
Here's one from 2016, maybe for Kirk Ferentz, called Bloodfather.
R.I.P. to a real one. The Brian Ferentz era, gone before its time. Tony, do you think the haters in the Iowa administration were just terrified that Brian was right on the verge of turning this baby around and getting this to getting over that 25-point mark? It feels like it was so close, just right there. Just one more week, and then the haters would not be denied. You hate to see someone who has worked so hard to get to the position he has attained have that all taken away from him, Tony, by the haters. Next one from @JordanN3Some3. How many teams have both offensive and defensive coordinators who call plays from the sideline and neither in the box? And this is, of course, relevant because of the 2022 Ohio State-Michigan game where you had Sharon Moore and the defensive coordinator, whose name is now escaping me for some reason. I can only think of Matt Weiss, who is the other co-offensive coordinator. Jesse Minter, there we go. I came up with it eventually. Both Sharon Moore and Jesse Minter were on the sidelines. That is kind of unusual. Jim Knowles, for example, up in the box for Ohio State. And so it is a little unusual to have both offensive and defensive coordinators there on the sideline. You got to remember Matt Weiss was up in the box for Michigan last year, I believe, because I think Sharon Moore was the only offensive coordinator down on the field. So they did have someone up in the box, but that is unusual enough that I think it's a little, that's a little intriguing, I guess, because, the implication here that if you want to read between the lines is Connor Stalions as not, due to his position, he's not allowed to be on a headset, so he could not relay that information upstairs. And if if you're standing right next to the guy, you could relay that information immediately and then have it immediately signaled in or called in from the sideline. So that's the reason that question's getting asked, just in case you're not reading between the lines.
Well, and I remember saying, well, I don't know, 10 days ago when this stuff was coming out in terms of the electronic equipment that was used, like I could see Stallions being on the sideline talking to somebody and then having the plays relayed, whether it goes from somebody else to him. It's like I've handed this off to somebody who can now use the electronic equipment. He was kind of a middleman in terms of the plays, but I I wish I had more time to like go through and look, because we started recording just a few minutes before we got this question, and I looked at Penn State, and their defensive coordinator Manny Diaz is on the field. Mike Yursich, the offensive coordinator, is up in the booth. I was just looking to see, like, I looked for Georgia to see and looked in their game notes to see where they were, and they're not listed. So, like, if you had some time to just go through and see how many play callers are both on the field, I don't think it's a lot for both of those guys to be on the field. But it is an interesting question, and this whole thing just sparks interesting questions with that, which then takes you down other rabbit holes, which then gets the conspiracy theory movie placed over our own head, in which case you might want to use the tinfoil hat from Signs. That was the other Mel Gibson movie mentioned there. And then once you get that tinfoil hat, you're free from anybody, I don't know, I don't even know where to go with it, hacking into your brain to get your thoughts.
I'm sure Mel Gibson has been in a hacking movie at some point. He's been a prolific actor for a long enough time that I'm sure he's done some movie where people are typing furiously in a dark room and yelling "enhance" at their TVs, at their computer monitors. It must have happened at some point.
Actually, it did. Tom, he was in a hacking movie. It's called The Patriot, where he famously hacked up a bunch of people with his hatchet.
Take that, British. Next one, at tangential to the allegation, how do Michigan's future opponents move forward preparing for them, knowing how much has been stolen?
I think that's a fascinating question that each opponent will have to answer, and they should be free to answer it, or they should want to answer it freely so they know what it's like to go through this. But so much of this is hidden behind the veil of the coaching profession and not wanting to throw other programs under the bus or even talk about other programs. But it's something that everybody is going to have to deal with, and it's something that they are dealing with. And I mentioned this, a Sunday morning, I tweeted out, like, the fact that Michigan fans are dismissing the ordeal of going through new plays, of opponents having to come up with new signals or whatever. And they're like, just everybody changes from week to week anyways. If you don't, then, you're an idiot. And it's like, you're dismissing the fact that what Michigan has seemingly done and what the Big Ten has warned Michigan could be doing, with the signal stealing, and the fact that, hey, now you've been warned, you might want to change things. It's like it ignores the fact that they have to go and change things. And so I think this is obviously just creates more work, and it creates more focused work. And with the focus more on this, it's taking some focus off of the actual preparation And so it's unfortunate for the programs that have to go through that. And if you say that, then you are considered a, um, well, I don't know what you're considered. I guess you'll just get a lot of responses to your Twitter saying "cry harder."
Yeah, Tony, how is your cope level right now? I feel
Yeah,
like
it's
I feel
epic
like it's
amounts of copium.
that does feel. I was about to diagnose you, but I'm not actually a medical doctor, so I didn't want to put anything officially on the record. But I was definitely getting that vibe from you. Yeah, it feels like this is an opportunity for Ohio State to, you know, no disrespect to Rutgers and Michigan State and Minnesota, but they are Michigan State, Minnesota, and Rutgers. So it feels like Ohio State has an opportunity to like just go to wristbands, do like change it up, like mix it up. You have some time to, if you spend an hour of practice each of the next 3 weeks or 2 hours of practice each of the next 3 weeks, you are probably still going to beat those three teams. Now, that is an hour or two that you could be putting towards Michigan prep, and they normally probably would be putting towards Michigan prep. But you can probably get it. You can probably figure it out. You can use meeting time to go through stuff. You're just going to have to switch it up a little bit. And you know what? Have a different wristband for every quarter so that by the time they figure out what you're doing, you're changing wristbands again and whatever. Like there are workarounds here. Yes, it is a pain. And yes, you're spending time that is a limited resource. You only have so much time in the day, so many days in the week, so many hours in the day to do stuff. And you're spending time doing this stuff. But now you have to get it kind of straightened out this year. So, and it's going to be fascinating to see what happens with Michigan's defensive stats, and especially defensive stats as they move forward, because they have looked so dominant this year. And it's just going to be so interesting to see how much of this changes, if any, in the coming weeks as they're playing better competition, but also people are probably a little more up to speed on what they need to do to potentially combat what Michigan has maybe been doing over the last couple of years. So it'll be interesting to see how much stuff changes. And then if stuff changes, how much is attributed to better competition versus, hey, the Intel thing is not working as much as it used to. So, well, you go ahead.
Yeah, and just to remind people, it's not just stealing signs. Everybody steals signs. This was going to various venues and recording signs and then using that information to steal signs and to interpret them, to break. Now, I'm not going to say code breaking because that part of it is a joke. That kind of messaging is a joke. Don't forget, like, it's not just sign stealing. It's much more involved than that, much more. Sign stealing is free. What they were doing was not, in terms of what Connor Stalions was doing. That was costing him money, seemingly out of his own pocket.
Yeah, I'm going to be so interested to see how that all shakes out moving forward. Because if you see a significant change, there's going to be a real, that's going to be a real interesting to see how that narrative plays out nationally. And if there's no change, it'll be interesting to see how that narrative plays out nationally. That, oh, see, it wasn't a big deal, or oh, see, it was a huge deal, or oh, see, they're just playing better teams now. So that'll be fun. Finally, something to talk about in the month of the Michigan game. Speaking of talking about stuff to talk about, from Professor John Frank, what should we make of the Harbaugh contract news? The Harbaugh contract news, of course, being that there was a report in the Wall Street Journal that Michigan had pulled Jim Harbaugh's new contract offer that would have made him the highest paid coach in the Big Ten. They rescinded, I believe was the word that they used. Mm-hmm. Jim Harbaugh then said it was not accurate, that it was, that our tweet from our buddy Mark Kuhn says, Jim Harbaugh says the report of the rescinded contract is not accurate. So I guess then the question is, okay, well, how, is it signed yet? No. Is it still on the table? I don't think we have any indication that it really, like, if he wanted to sign that today, that's necessarily. So, maybe this is a little bit more of a semantic argument that it rescinded is like, well, it was taken off the table and is unavailable, and the implication is forever. And maybe it was, maybe really it was temporarily withdrawn from the table, but still could go back on the table. I mean, to me, you can play word games all you want and like, no, that's not accurate. Like, well, what about isn't it? set the record straight for us. What happened? Well, no, I don't want to go into details. Like, okay, that's fine. But, I think my best read of the situation is if Jim Harbaugh decided today that he wanted to sign that contract, a copy of that contract would not necessarily be made available to him by Michigan for him to sign. So therefore, whatever word you want to put on that, it is not necessarily there right at this moment, which represents, it seems like, a change of status of that contract offer.
And I think what you would get from the Michigan side is that the contract was never exactly ready just yet. And then once this comes down, they put a hold on finalizing it, and you'll just wait. But we had been hearing for weeks that a contract was ready or was going to be put in front of Jim Harbaugh, and an extension, big extension. And now that is no longer happening. And so, maybe rescinded, put on hold. It's all semantics. I think much of it is semantics, but even Jim Harbaugh's quote on that, I wouldn't say that's accurate. And we say that is also a phrase that we use when there are half truths, half lies, that sort of thing, where, well, that's only 92% accurate. So I wouldn't say that's entirely accurate. And so there's some wordplay in this as well, I think. But I'm with you there. I don't think he could sign a contract right now, but also I don't know that there was a contract to sign, like a finished contract to sign. And I think the finishing of it is maybe what got delayed, but also maybe the thing that got rescinded was the desire to finish the contract, to put it in front of him. And it's just levels and steps that, first this, then this, then this. Well, it's like, well, we're not going to do this part right now because we want to see how this plays out. So yeah, that's a bunch of semantics, I think. And if he wanted to sign a contract right now, I'm with you. I don't know that he could.
Right. And, has the plan or the schedule for the contract changed in any way? It feels like there's probably something to the fact that it has. So yeah, at that point, it's just kind of using whatever words you want to use. And Jim Harbaugh does have a way with words, Tony, because the next question from row 145676, thoughts on Harbaugh's presser and his discussion of field corn versus houseplants.
Yeah, he was asked about playing at night in, I guess, what will be November, and he said they've got a team that can play at 12 o'clock, 3:30, 7:30, 9, or whatever, all conditions. And he said it's like field corn as opposed to being a houseplant. Nothing against houseplants. Obviously, he doesn't want to get the houseplant lobby angry with him. This is a man of the people. He knows what he's doing. Nothing against houseplants. They have their function. They can be beautiful in the home. They can bring great beauty and value to a home. But the field corn, just drop a seed in a crack of a sidewalk and it'll burrow down and come up with any energy that it can find, and then rise up in a stalk-like fashion and just start producing. I would say that's what our team is more like. Tom, my first bit as I'm reading through this, I disagree with calling a stalk of corn stalk-like. It's an actual stalk.
It is an actual stalk. Yeah, it's like that car is car-like. Like, yeah, technically, yes. I find his different ways of talking about stuff so fascinating. We were up in Ann Arbor for the press conference the Monday before the Ohio State-Michigan game last year, and he talked about his team as, I think it was a happy band of warriors on a happy journey. And it was like, I don't think I've ever heard a college football coach use either of those halves of that phrase, let alone together, let alone the week of the biggest game of the season. And, they came out and won the game. So I guess they had reason to be happy warriors and that their journey was happy until they got to the Fiesta Bowl, and then it was less happy. But, they had a good roadmap for that game, it sounds like. So, that's reason enough to be happy. Yeah, he has such a unique way of talking and communicating, and it's like, how many coaches do we cover where it's like, you have the complete football robots and you put those kind of to one side, And you have the people who are just kind of like the normal people where you feel like you could sit down and just have a conversation with them and you would, not feel like you were talking to a robot. And then there are just the people who are just a little different. And Jim Harbaugh's not a football robot necessarily. He's just a little different. And you talk to people who cover the team and you hear the word weird a lot. And that's, I think there's a, maybe more of a judgment to that word than you might, people would necessarily put their names on publicly, but it's just, he's a different cat. And that comes out in all sorts of different ways, including our team is field corn instead of a house plant. You wonder, Tony, which team does he think is a house plant? I have thoughts.
That is very interesting. That's a great thought, Tom. I wouldn't have expected to go down this rabbit hole, but in terms of his robotness, he's kind of like a robot if it was designed and programmed by the Old Farmer's Almanac, with a lot of these things that he says, with the nervous bird and the worms wouldn't be afraid of birds with guns or whatever, if worms with guns aren't afraid of birds, or perhaps muskets if we're talking about the Old Farmer's Almanac. I would like to know what he is reading, because he does come up with some stuff that's really interesting. And the field corn one is because it just is. And he has a lot of isms that I would like to know where they come from, whether it's an ism of the day calendar, which that's a fantastic idea. I should look into that and just steal like Old Farmer's Almanac stuff and throw it into Chat GPT and be like, fancy it up, modernize it, if you will. But I get a kick out of some of the stuff he says. Other stuff is like when he's talking football or talking about his players, talking about his team, unless he uses these analogies, I gloss over a lot of it, because it is stunted and stilted and like the very coach like answers. But when he goes into this stuff, that to me provides more insight. The Happy Warrior stuff, this stuff, every now and again, he'll throw something in and it's like, okay, this guy has a personality.
Yeah, it's a personality. It's just very off the beaten path for a college football coach, and that's not necessarily bad. It's a little off the beaten path for a non-college football coach too. So it is a very different experience to cover a Jim Harbaugh press conference. We go to those Big Ten media days every summer and we hear, all 14 Big Ten coaches talk, and there's a wide variety of personalities and levels of conversational comfort and all of that kind of stuff. And Jim Harbaugh is always on like one end of that range of coaches in terms of what it's like talking to him. And so, yeah, he is a little, Tony, like a box of chocolates, because you never know what you're going to get. Last one from D. Shake It Watson. I know you all, quote, don't want to speculate, close quote, parentheses, still true, exclamation point, close parentheses. But it's what the fans want, Tony. So assuming things go the way they are appearing to be headed in Ann Arbor, are there any recruits in this class or 2025 that would be of interest to Ohio State? So, I guess for the purposes of this question, let's assume that after this season, and, maybe before the end of the season, it becomes apparent that Jim Harbaugh is not going to stay at Michigan. So for the purposes of this conversation, the class of 2024, every Michigan recruit is potentially open for Ohio State to pursue. It feels like Ohio State doesn't have that many spots they need to fill in the class. They need to add another offensive lineman or two, maybe. I think they'd like to add maybe another corner, maybe. I mean, the class is in relatively good shape. Another safety, maybe. I mean, there's not, and several of the offensive linemen in that Michigan class are from Ohio and don't have Ohio State offers. So you get the sense Ohio State probably doesn't, has kind of looked and considered it and not decided that was something that they were going to be, interested in poaching. I mean, I'm just looking at the list right now. Andrew Sprague from Kansas City, Missouri is their highest ranked recruit. He is a tackle, number 55 nationally. I mean, that Ohio State could probably use a tackle in this class. I don't have any idea. I am not one of the recruiting guys, so I don't have any sense for, is that someone who is camped at Ohio State and there's any kind of relationship? I don't know. But, you go down the list and Jaden Davis, Ohio State has a quarterback in the class, Aaron Noland, who's ranked, I think, higher than Jaden Davis is. Jordan Marshall, the running back, he's from Ohio. Ohio State has at least one running back, maybe two that are ranked higher than Jordan Marshall right now. And they're in relatively good shape at most spots. I know Josiah Edmond is a name that we had sort of heard in terms of cornerback, but I don't think that Ohio State just doesn't have that many holes to fill for 2024 that they would need to do the like Tim Beckman, like camp outside Penn State thing and just try and recruit people from campus. 2025, Michigan only has 2 commits, so that's a relatively short list. One of them is an in-state defensive lineman and a cornerback out of the state of Florida. So I don't think, Tony, I see anything that between Ohio State's relatively short list of needs for 24 and Michigan's relatively short list of commits for 25. I don't know that I necessarily see a ton of opportunity here.
Yeah, and the corner is Chris Ewald from Chaminade Madonna. So that's where, Ohio State has some inroads there with Jeremiah Smith. But if you look at the quarterback situation next in the 2025 class, they already have a commitment from Blake Woodby. But then 3 of the top 4 corners in that class, I'm just going to read some names to you, Tom. Tell me if these are familiar. Trey McNutt, Buckeye Legacy. He's the number 4 corner. Dorian Brew, who was from Ohio but moved to Texas, so that may be a little tougher. He's number 3. Devin Sanchez, the number 2 corner, number 7 player in the nation. I know Ohio State and those who cover recruiting feel pretty good about the Buckeyes' chances with him. So they've got some guys that are more likely than somebody that is already committed to Michigan in terms of that situation. And who would we be surprised? I'd probably be surprised if there is anything that comes out about this or there's any punishment handed down before signing day. And I would also be surprised if anybody puts off signing day from December to February. That's becoming more and more rare. If you're committed now, you're generally going to sign in December.
Right. And, if you do have a whole coaching staff leave, and again, Lord, this is purely speculative. This is purely based on the hypothetical from the question. If you did have Jim Harbaugh leaves and both coordinators leave and, there's some looming something or other from the NCAA, you can get out of your letter of intent. We have seen people get out of letters of intent with coaching changes and that kind of thing in the past. That is no longer, as soon as you sign it, you have to sit out a year. The rules have changed on a lot of that stuff. And, so I don't think that's necessarily, I'm not expecting a neutron bomb to fall on Michigan, anytime between now and signing day. So I think this is purely a hypothetical but it is possible. I'm with you. I don't think that there is a real high likelihood that there's going to be such a massive earth-shattering whatever it is that comes down between now and signing day that this is any kind of a short-term situation that we will need to deal with in something other than a hypothetical.
And we had a few other questions that we will parse off to other shows, and we'll answer likely on Tuesday anyway regarding some of this stuff. But we just had so many of the Michigan questions that we just wanted to keep it focused to that. So I want to thank you all for tuning in. A reminder, please find us at buckeyehuddle.com. If you want to become a member, that's a great way to support what we do. It's a great way to show support, and it's an encouraging thing for all of us in this time of the holidays that are coming up. Specifically, Tom, Halloween and Thanksgiving, the 2 fall holidays.
Halloween, the traditional gift for Halloween, a membership to buckeyehuddle.com.
And then Thanksgiving, you thank the people by giving another membership. So that, and also youtube.com/BuckeyeHuddle. If you want to go ahead and like this video that you're watching right now, that would be great. And of course, hit the bell to be notified. And if you have not subscribed to the channel yet, please do so. Helps the algorithms find us. And as we know, algorithms, an important word in the football sphere right now. So thank you all for tuning in, and we'll talk to you guys later.